My sister called me a pathetic loser at family dinner, so I cut her off financially. What happened next exposed everything from her secret boyfriend to her expensive lifestyle funded with MY overtime money. This is how I took control back. I should have known that dinner was going to be a disaster the second I walked through the door. My name is Oliver. I'm 32 years old, and I live in a tiny town in New Hampshire. My family's apartment is small, with walls so thin you can hear the neighbor's TV, but tonight it felt even smaller. Mom had tried to make it festive, hanging those old plastic streamers that smelled like basement storage. We were all crammed around the rickety dining table, Dad at the head, Layla across from me, Milo squirming in his chair. I could tell Layla had been in one of her moods since I got there. She was already rolling her eyes before I even took my seat. I tried to push through, to smile and eat the dry chicken Mom always overcooked. But then Layla started in on her woe is me routine, telling Mom and Dad about how her rent was due again, how she couldn't make ends meet because her boss was such a jerk. I listened quietly at first, but when she started going on about how no one helps her, I couldn't keep my mouth shut. Layla, I just gave you $300 last week, I said, my voice calm but firm. I could feel my pulse pick up as I spoke. You said it was for Milo's school trip. She froze for a second, her fork halfway to her mouth. Then she looked at me like I was dirt on her shoe. Are you really going to bring that up right now? She snapped. God, you're such a pathetic parasite, Oliver. Always acting like you're some kind of savior because you throw money at me. I felt my face burn. Milo was watching me, his big eyes darting back and forth like he was at a tennis match. Mom and Dad just sat there. Dad coughed, staring at his plate like it had all the answers in the world. Mom sighed, wiping her hands on her apron. You know Layla has a lot on her plate, Oliver, Mom said softly, like she was explaining a simple fact. She's had a hard life. You need to be more understanding. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. My sister was calling me a parasite in front of everyone, and all Mom could do was tell me to be more understanding? Something in me cracked then, like a thin piece of ice finally giving way under a heavy boot. That's when Layla picked up the cake Mom had made, store-bought, already dry as dust, and smashed it right into my face. Frosting smeared across my nose and cheeks, and I could feel the cheap paper plate crack against my jaw. It was so sudden, I didn't even react at first. The whole table went dead silent. Even Milo stopped fidgeting. I wiped cake from my eyes and looked at my parents, waiting for them to say something to tell Layla she'd gone too far. But they didn't. They just looked away. I stood up, cake dripping down my chin. My hands clenched so tight they were shaking. I looked at Layla, who was already smirking like she'd won something. And right then, I decided, no more money, no more excuses. She was on her own. I didn't say a word as I walked out the door, but I felt something shift in me, something that had been waiting to break free for a long time. I was done. That dinner was about a month ago, but I still see Layla's smirk whenever I close my eyes. I see the way my parents wouldn't even meet my gaze. The next morning, I woke up early, my face sticky with dried frosting, and my mind replaying every word Layla spat at me. It wasn't the first time she'd called me pathetic, though. For years, she's been taking my help and twisting it into some kind of obligation, like I owed her everything because she was my sister. I guess in some twisted way, I believed it. I've been paying her rent since Milo was a baby. I remember the night she called me crying, saying Milo's dad had left, and she didn't know how to keep the lights on. I was 24, barely scraping by myself, but I couldn't stand the thought of my nephew shivering in some cold, dark apartment. So I sent her money, and she promised it was just temporary. That was 8 years ago. Since then, temporary turned into a permanent fixture in my life. Rent, groceries, school supplies for Milo, even Layla's phone bills when she claimed she needed it to stay connected for work. There was always a new reason. Always a new crisis. I didn't have much of a life outside of work and paying for Layla's disasters. My friends would invite me on trips or even just out for drinks, but I always turned them down. I told them I couldn't afford it. Technically, that was true, but the real reason was I didn't think I deserved to spend money on myself. Not when Milo needed new shoes, not when Layla needed groceries. I told myself I was doing it for Milo, because he deserved better, but deep down, I know it was more complicated than that. Layla had a way of twisting things. She'd send me pictures of Milo holding up his report cards, smiling like he'd just won the lottery. Thanks for everything, Uncle Oliver, she'd say in her texts. We couldn't do it without you. I'd read those words over and over until they felt like a mantra. But then, the next text would come, something like, can you cover the car insurance? It's due tomorrow. Or, we're behind on rent again. Milo's so stressed about it. Please, can you help? I remember one night, I was on my couch, staring at my phone, my bank account practically screaming at me. I called Uncle Raymond. He's my mom's older brother, and he's never been one for sugarcoating. You're setting yourself on fire to keep her warm, he told me bluntly. You're killing yourself to save someone who doesn't even want to swim. I wanted to argue with him, to tell him he didn't understand. But he did. He saw it clearer than I ever could. Layla was always the fragile one, the one who needed rescuing. Mom and Dad never called her out on it. They just told me to be patient, to be understanding, because Layla's had a hard life. They didn't care that mine was getting harder because of it. I didn't date much. I couldn't remember the last time I'd taken someone out to dinner without worrying about what bill Layla would be hitting me up for next. I never took vacations. My coworkers talked about trips to Mexico, fancy cruises, and here I was, living in a tiny, one-bedroom apartment that I could barely keep stocked with groceries for myself. I'd lie in bed some nights, staring at the ceiling, wondering how I ended up here. I used to have dreams, things like opening my own shop, maybe buying a little fixer-upper and turning it into a home. But those dreams faded, replaced by Layla's endless emergencies. I told myself I was doing it for Milo. He was the only reason I kept going. I'd show up at Layla's with bags of groceries and see his little face light up, and I'd think, okay, maybe it's worth it. But even that was starting to feel hollow, because every time I handed over money, Layla would look at me like it was her right, like I owed her, because I was her brother and Milo's uncle. Sitting in my apartment now, with the cake-stained memory of that dinner still fresh in my mind, I realize Uncle Raymond was right. I'm burning myself out to keep her warm, and she doesn't even notice the flames. And for the first time, I feel something new, resentment. A slow, simmering anger that I've been holding back for far too long. A couple of weeks after that family dinner, I noticed something that didn't sit right. Layla had landed a job at the convention center in town. She'd called me up, breathless with excitement, telling me she'd finally found stable work. I was genuinely happy for her. I thought maybe this was the break she needed to finally stand on her own 2 feet. But that's not how it played out. The calls and texts for money didn't stop. In fact, they got more frequent. First it was, can you cover Milo's lunch money this week? My first paycheck isn't here yet. Then, my boss is being a jerk and didn't give me my full hours. Can you help with rent? She always had some story. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But something felt off. My gut wouldn't let it go. One night, I was scrolling through Instagram, just trying to unwind from a long day at work. And there she was, Layla, posting a story at some fancy sushi restaurant. I blinked at my phone. She'd been at my door that morning asking for $50 for groceries. And here she was eating a meal that probably cost twice that. I clicked through the rest of her posts, new clothes, a shiny new phone she didn't mention needing money for, and selfies at concerts with her friends. Not a single post about how hard life was, not a word about Milo's needs or her boss screwing her over. The next time she asked for money, I tried to bring it up, careful not to sound accusatory. Hey, Layla, I saw your pictures at that concert the other night. Looked fun. She bristled instantly. Are you spying on me now, Oliver? It was just one night out. I needed it. Okay? My mental health matters too. I get that, I said slowly. But you told me you were broke. You asked for money for Milo's new backpack. She let out a sharp laugh, but there was no humor in it. So what, Oliver? I can't have a life because I'm a single mom? You're such a control freak. You know that. The word stung. Control freak? I'd been bending over backward for her for years, and now I was a control freak for questioning her spending? I tried to shake it off, but the feeling only got worse. I'd go on social media and see new outfits, new shoes. Layla out at dinner with friends. Layla at some fancy spa. And always, the next day, there'd be another text. Can you help me out just this once? Milo needs new clothes. You know how fast he grows. That's when Uncle Raymond's voice started echoing in my head again. You're setting yourself on fire for someone who's warming herself at your expense. The words sank deeper every time I saw another one of Layla's posts. I started noticing smaller things too, like the way she'd get defensive if I even asked how her job was going. It's fine, she'd snap. Stop worrying about it. Or how she'd change the subject whenever I mentioned money she owed me. I didn't want to believe she'd been lying to me. I didn't want to believe that all those nights I sat up, worrying about how to cover her rent or buy Milo's shoes, she'd been blowing money on sushi and concert tickets. But the evidence was there, right in front of me, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. I didn't confront her right away. I needed to be sure. I needed to see just how deep this went. And so, even though my stomach turned at the thought, I decided to keep watching. Because if she was lying, I had to know. I had to stop letting her use Milo's smile and her crocodile tears to keep draining me dry. A few nights later, I was at Layla's apartment watching Milo while she said she had to work late. She didn't look like she was going to work, though she'd come out of her bedroom in a dress that cost more than my entire monthly grocery bill, her hair done up in a way I'd never seen before. I didn't say anything as she left. Milo and I watched a movie together, something about superheroes, and for a couple of hours, I let myself forget about everything. Just the two of us, popcorn on the floor, Milo's head resting on my arm. He was the only reason I'd kept doing this for so long. But when I went to wash up after he fell asleep, I noticed something that made my chest tighten. In Layla's bathroom, there was a man's razor next to her sink and a bottle of expensive aftershave. Stuff that didn't belong to me, didn't belong to Layla. Stuff I couldn't afford on my own paycheck. My first thought was that I was overthinking it. Maybe she'd gotten them for Milo to play pretend. But Milo was 7, not 17. And the aftershave had that grown man cologne smell, rich, musky, like the cologne ads in glossy magazines. I left the bathroom and went back to the hallway. That's when I saw the jacket hanging on a hook by the door. A man's jacket, leather, brand new. The kind you'd only buy if you had money to burn. I swallowed hard. Later that night, after Milo had fallen asleep, I called Uncle Raymond. He'd always told me to trust my gut. I found men's stuff in her bathroom. Ray, I said, my voice low, even though Milo was dead asleep in the other room, and a jacket that's definitely not hers. There was a pause. She's got a boyfriend, he said finally, and you're the one paying for her rent so she can play house with him. I didn't want to believe it. I told myself there had to be another explanation. But then, a few days later, Milo let something slip that made everything clear. We were in the kitchen, making his favorite, grilled cheese sandwiches, when he looked up at me with those big eyes. Uncle Jay says we're going to the beach again soon, he said with a big grin. He buys me all the best ice cream. Did you know there's a kind that tastes like bubble gum? I froze, the spatula in my hand trembling. Uncle Jace? I asked carefully, trying to keep my voice calm. Yeah, Milo said, as casual as if he was talking about a cartoon character. He sleeps over sometimes too. Mommy says he's really good to us. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. Jace, the boyfriend, the one who was sleeping over while I was emptying my pockets to keep Layla and Milo afloat. I didn't let Milo see how rattled I was. I finished making his sandwich, cut the crust off just the way he liked, and watched him devour it with that innocent smile. But inside, I was reeling. When Layla got home that night, late, her lipstick smudged, hair must like she'd been dancing all night, I didn't say a word. I just nodded as she thanked me for watching Milo and slipped out the door without looking back. The next morning, I started gathering the evidence. The receipts I'd seen in the trash, fancy restaurants, hotel reservations, the new things she'd bought without any explanation, the text she'd sent me, always calling it, for Milo, always making it sound like it was life or death. I took pictures of everything, the jacket, the razor, the aftershave, the boyfriend's mail that had come to her address by mistake. It felt dirty, sneaky, but I needed the truth. I needed proof of what she'd been doing. Each photo I took felt like a weight lifting off my shoulders, like I was finally seeing clearly for the first time in years. My heart was pounding, but there was a calmness underneath it too, a cold, steely resolve that said, enough. I was done being her safety net. Done letting her use me as an ATM while she played house with some guy who could afford leather jackets and beach weekends. I was ready to finally stand up and say, no more. It was a Friday night when I finally decided to confront Layla. I waited in her apartment while Milo was at a sleepover with one of his friends, the whole place quiet and dimly lit except for the glow of the streetlights coming in through the curtains. My hands were clammy, but my mind was sharp. This was it. No more second chances. She came in around midnight, her heels clicking across the tile floor, her hair perfect, makeup still flawless. She was dressed in a sleek red dress that looked like it cost more than my monthly rent. She stopped short when she saw me sitting on the couch. Oliver, she said, trying to smile like nothing was wrong. What are you doing here? I thought you had work tomorrow. I took the night off, I said, my voice steady. We need to talk. She let out a little laugh, waving a hand like she could brush it off. Can it wait? I'm exhausted. I shook my head. No, Layla. We're doing this now. I stood up and walked to the kitchen counter, picking up the stack of receipts and the photos I'd taken. I laid them out one by one, not saying a word. Her eyes flicked down at the papers, her expression tightening with every photo. This is your life, Layla, I said quietly. Concert tickets, spa days, fancy dinners, all while telling me you can't pay rent, can't buy Milo new shoes. She snatched up a receipt, her voice going hard. So what? You're spying on me now? Going through my trash? This is insane. No, I said, my heart pounding. What's insane is that you've been using me for years, telling me Milo needed this or that, and you were spending my money on nights out with Jace. Her mouth twisted. Oh my God, you're jealous. That's what this is about, isn't it? You're jealous because you don't have anyone, so you want to ruin this for me. I clenched my jaw, taking a deep breath. No, Layla. This isn't about jealousy. This is about honesty. About the fact that you lied to me over and over, used Milo like a pawn to keep me paying your bills while you lived like a queen. She rolled her eyes and threw the receipts down on the counter. You're being dramatic. So I went out a few times. What? You think that makes me some kind of monster? You think you're the only person who deserves to have fun? I think, I said slowly, that you've been treating me like your personal ATM while pretending to be this struggling single mom. I think you've been lying to everyone, including Milo. That seemed to hit her. She crossed her arms, her chin jutting out stubbornly. Fine. So what? You want to take it all back now? Tell me you're cutting me off, Oliver. Just say it. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the person she really was. The manipulation, the entitlement, the endless cycle of guilt and demands. I'm done, I said softly but firmly. No more money. No more excuses. You can figure it out with Jace, or whoever else you're using to keep this charade going. For a second, I thought she might actually cry. Her eyes got glassy, her lips trembling. But then she hardened again, her voice turning cold. You're pathetic, she spat. You've always been pathetic, Oliver. You think you're so noble, so self-sacrificing, but really you're just bitter. Bitter because you're alone and you'll always be alone. I felt a flicker of pain at that, because it was the kind of thing only someone who really knew you could say. But I pushed it down, held my head up. Maybe I am alone, I said, but at least I'm not lying to the people who love me. At least I'm not using my own son as a shield for my bullshit. She went silent at that, her eyes flickering, and in the silence, I felt something shift inside me, a weight lifting, a final break from all the years of guilt and shame she'd piled on me. I picked up the photos and the receipts, tucking them back into the folder. I'm leaving these with you, I said, so you remember that I know the truth. And I'm done. I turned and walked out of that apartment, my heart pounding, my palms sweating. But as I stepped out into the cool night air, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Relief. Real, honest relief. I was done being her safety net. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. It didn't take long for the fallout to start. The next morning, my phone was already buzzing. First it was Mom, her voice tight and brittle. "Oliver, how could you do this to your sister?" She called me in tears this morning. I let her rant. I didn't argue. When she finally took a breath, I just said, "I told Layla the truth, Mom. She's been lying to all of us." Mom went quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You don't understand, Oliver. Layla's had it hard. You know that. She's a single mother. She's doing her best." I almost laughed. Her best? Mom? She's been using Milo to get money out of me while she's out with some guy living the good life. But Mom wouldn't hear it. She started in with that soft, wounded voice she always used when she wanted me to back down. "Oliver, you're Milo's uncle. Family means helping each other, even when it's hard." Family. That word again. It felt like a hammer coming down on me. I've been helping Mom for years, but she's using me, and I'm done. She sighed heavily. "You're being cruel, Oliver. You're punishing Milo because you're angry at his mother." That stung. Milo had always been my soft spot, but I knew it wasn't true. I'm not punishing Milo. I'm just not going to let Layla treat me like a bank anymore. Dad called me that night, his voice gruff like he'd been holding back tears, or maybe just holding back his anger. "Son, we don't turn our backs on family," he said flatly. "I'm not turning my back," I said, trying to stay calm. "I'm just done paying for Layla's lies." "That's the same thing," he shot back. "You're abandoning your sister and your nephew. How can you live with yourself?" I could feel the old guilt creeping up, the same guilt that had kept me stuck for so long. But this time, I didn't let it swallow me. Because for once, I'm doing what's right for me. Silence. Dad didn't know what to say to that. He just let out a long, heavy sigh and hung up. Only Uncle Raymond seemed to understand. He called me up a couple of days later. "Heard you finally grew a spine," he said in that gruff way of his. "Proud of you, kid." "I don't know if proud is the word," I said, staring out my window at the quiet street below. "But it feels like the right thing to do." "That's because it is," he said simply. "Family's supposed to lift you up, not drag you down." The days that followed were a mess of texts and voicemails from my parents. They wanted me to come over for dinner, to talk it out. But I knew what that meant. They tried to guilt me into going back to the old ways, paying Layla's bills, fixing her messes, keeping the peace. I didn't answer. I let them stew in it. Let them see that I wasn't budging. I thought a lot about Milo in those days. I missed him. I missed his laugh, the way he'd run up to me with that gap-toothed grin. But I knew I couldn't keep letting Layla use him as a pawn. If I kept bailing her out, she'd never stop. One night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, feeling that old ache in my chest. But under it, there was something new too. Something that felt like hope. Like maybe, finally, I could build something for myself. I wasn't sure what that was yet, but I knew it started with this. Saying no to Layla. Saying no to my parents' endless lectures. Saying yes to the idea that my life was mine to live, not just a safety net for everyone else. And that, for now, was enough. After weeks of silence, after the lectures and the guilt trips and the pleading had run their course, I decided it was time to make this official. No more quiet, polite boundaries. No more letting them believe I was just going through a phase. I wanted Layla to understand that her lies and manipulations had real consequences. So I called up Uncle Raymond's friend, Colin. He worked in debt recovery, a professional at getting back money that was borrowed but never returned. I told him everything, every dollar I'd given Layla, every Venmo payment labeled loan that she had never paid back. Colin listened in that calm, measured way of his. "You've got a solid case," he said finally, "especially with those texts and receipts." She acknowledged the money as loans, and that's all we need. A week later, Layla was served with an official debt notice, $35,000 owed, itemized and undeniable. I knew the letter would blindside her, and it did. She called me within hours, her voice shrill and cracking with rage. "Oliver, what the hell is this?" she screamed. "You can't do this to me. You're my brother." I held the phone a little away from my ear, her words rattling through the speaker like a bad radio signal. "I'm not your ATM anymore, Layla," I said calmly. "You took the money. You spent it. Now you pay it back." "Are you insane?" she shouted, her voice going high and desperate. "You're going to ruin me. What about Milo? How can you do this to him?" I took a deep breath, closing my eyes. "Milo's not the problem here, Layla. You are, and I'm done covering for you." She switched tactics in an instant, her voice dropping to a trembling, pitiful whisper. "Oliver, please. I'm your sister. We're family. You know I'm trying my best." I almost laughed at how fast she could turn on the tears. "You've been trying your best for 8 years, I said. "This isn't about family. It's about you taking and never giving back." There was a long pause. I could hear her breathing hard, like she was trying to decide if she should keep begging or start screaming again. In the end, she chose fury. "You're heartless," she spat. "You're jealous because I have someone, and you're alone. You think this makes you better than me? It doesn't." I didn't bother responding to that. I just said, "Figure it out with Jace. You're done using me," and hung up. After that, Layla's social media turned into a pity party. Posts about betrayal and family that doesn't understand. Selfies of her looking sad and fragile. But I didn't care anymore. I knew it was all for show. Colin kept me updated. "She's already paid back a little," he said with a satisfied chuckle. "Jace must be helping her out. Good. Let them figure it out. And me? For the first time in years, I felt free. No more worrying about how to cover her rent. No more frantic texts about emergencies that turned out to be nights out with some new boyfriend. I was done. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about showing Layla and everyone else that I wasn't going to be their fallback plan anymore. They'd have to live with their choices, just like I had to live with mine. And that was a debt I was finally willing to collect. After all the yelling, the crying, the begging, and the threats, the dust finally settled. Layla and Jace had no choice but to start paying back what they owed. The debt payments trickled in, small at first, but steady. Colin said it would take a while for the whole amount to be repaid, but I didn't mind. I wasn't counting the dollars. I was counting the freedom. With that money slowly coming in, I started to breathe easier. I fixed my car's busted transmission, something I'd put off for way too long because every extra dollar went to Layla. I set up a little savings account, just for me. Watching the balance grow felt like watching a plant finally sprout after years of pouring water into cracked earth. I even signed up for a community college class, Intro to Small Business Management. It was something I'd always wanted to do, but I told myself I didn't have the time or the money. Now I was done making excuses. I was building something for myself, one piece at a time. Uncle Raymond called me up one Saturday morning and told me to come over for a fishing trip. When I got to his place, he was already waiting with his old fishing pole in hand, a cooler full of cheap beer, and a grin that said he was proud of me even if he wouldn't say it out loud. "Feels good, doesn't it?" he said, clinking his can against mine as we sat in the sun by the lake. "Feels like being your own man." I nodded, taking a sip and letting the cool breeze wash over me. "It does," I said simply. He gave me a long look, the kind of look that didn't need any words. Then he cracked another beer and said, "About damn time." At night, when the world was quiet, I'd lie in bed and think about how different everything felt. The guilt was gone. The endless worrying, the constant knot in my stomach, gone. I still thought about Milo a lot. I missed his laugh, the way he'd curl up next to me on the couch like I was the only safe place in the world. And I knew, deep down, that I'd always be there for him if he needed me. But I couldn't keep sacrificing my life for Layla's lies. One Saturday morning, I treated myself to a fancy coffee from that new place downtown. I'd always told myself it was too expensive, a luxury I couldn't afford. But as I sat there, the sun warm on my face and the rich, creamy taste of that cappuccino in my mouth, I realized I could afford it. Not just the coffee, but the feeling that came with it, the feeling of choosing myself for once. I took a long sip and smiled. For years, I'd been so scared that if I stopped helping Layla, I'd be nothing. That if I wasn't her safety net, I didn't have a purpose. But I see it now. I'm not nothing. I'm not just a wallet or a backup plan. I'm a man who's finally learned how to stand up for himself. And if there's one thing I know for sure, it's this. I'm done letting other people decide what my life should look like. From here on out, I'm writing my own story, one without guilt, without manipulation, and without the weight of someone else's choices crushing me. I took another sip of that perfect coffee, feeling it warm me from the inside out, and for the first time in a long time, I felt completely and undeniably free.